Good afternoon, everyone. So we're going to talk about Millennial Potash here. We recently embarked on this project, on the Potash Project in Gabon. This is a very interesting project, previously explored in a good jurisdiction. And our view of potash industry is that there's an interesting confluence of events. The demand has been growing very strongly in the last few years. I would say probably the last couple of decades, but there's been significant constraint on the supply side because of geopolitical events in Europe. So we found this very interesting project that has been previously explored, put together a very strong team to take it to the next stage. So we'll talk about that in more detail. So why should you listen to us? Well, the project has, we believe, all the factors in place that will allow us to turn this project into another success story. We will earn up to 100% of this project. The project has been actually explored, as I said in the past. They've intercepted very thick and high-grade potash seams, both sylvinite and carnallite. It is in a very good jurisdiction. It's in Gabon, very stable, very well-defined mining framework in the country. Once in production, it's going to be one of the nearest suppliers, I should say, to Brazil. Brazil is one of the largest potash importing nations in the world. And we have everything on site. So infrastructure is on site. We got the drill cores, drill rig, the camp infrastructure, that's all on site. Our team has done these projects in the past. We've built a lithium project. We've built and sold a couple of potash projects, specifically in North America and Africa. So we've done it before, and we'll talk about the team later on. And we'll also touch on the sector. And we have very aggressive timelines. And we think that by the end of this year, we'll be able to complete a preliminary economics study. So our team, again, has done quite a few projects in the past. Specifically on the potash side, we've done a large potash project in Saskatchewan in Canada, and then another potash project in Ethiopia in East Africa. The same team is coming back. We're putting it together. Our chief executive officer is going to be Jason Wilkinson, who has run a couple of potash projects in the past. And then we're going to be basically turning all our board into a very heavy potash-oriented organization, including with some of the heavy hitters from large potash producers. A little bit about potash sector. So the entire sector was shocked last year when Russia obviously invaded Ukraine. A lot of sanctions were imposed on both Russia and Belarus. Between Russia and Belarus, they produce about 30% of the world's supply of potash. So that supply is still constrained. About 50% of it doesn't hit the market. So we don't know how long, obviously, it's going to continue. And even after the war is over, we think that that supply constraint will be there. So that is a very interesting development, obviously completely unexpected development in the sector in the last several months. On the demand side, obviously, demand has been growing. The population is growing. As usual, last year we hit 8 billion people, so good job, everyone. And also there are a lot of issues, obviously, with soil depletion and so forth. I mean, we don't talk about it, but it is significant. Now, the project is in the southwestern tip of Gabon, and this is the same potash basin that extends from the neighboring Republic of Congo into Gabon. And just a few words about Gabon. It is the third richest GDP per capita country in Africa, primarily due to oil and gas revenues. The country overhauled their mining laws a few years back, so it's a very well-defined framework within which we think as a team we can operate. And going forward, we think that they will continue with this because they've been very open to foreign direct investment. We see a lot of large companies operating in Gabon. Shell is there, Total, Eramet on the mining side, so that's all very positive. Now the project, you can see some of these photos from the previous operator. You can see the cores, so the red part, as you can recognize, that's all potash in that core, and the operations, again, all of this equipment is still on site, so that really will allow us to mobilize pretty quickly. On this slide, I just want to show you briefly, these stratigraphic columns from two different drill programs. The first one was done in the 1970s by an oil and gas company out of France. They drilled this deep hole specifically targeting oil and gas. They didn't find any, but they found a lot of potash. In 2017, a junior out of Australia came and drilled about 20 kilometers away from this cluster, and they drilled down to about 500 meters, but they started intersecting potash at a very shallow depth of about 230 meters. So we think it's a very consistent, continuous potash basin, again, extending from Congo all the way into Gabon. So we will be doing solution mining. I mentioned a couple of potash projects in the past that we've done. Both of these projects were amenable to solution mining. Why we focus on solution mining? Well, the answer is pretty simple. It does two things for us. First, it keeps our cost structure very low. The CapEx is actually very manageable. And OpEx is also quite manageable. But also, it has a minimal environmental impact. And that's very important. No matter where we are nowadays, the permitting process obviously is extremely important, and sometimes it drags on. With solution mining, we really have a very benign situation where we can get the permitting process expedited. And also, the solution mining approach allows you to develop this project in a modular fashion without losing out on the economies of scale. The location is critical in potash business. So as I mentioned, the Russians and Belarusians produce about 35% of the world's supply of potash, but Canadians produce another 35%. So basically 70% of the world's supply of potash comes from Northern Hemisphere. Brazil, which is going to be nearest to us, consumes about 12 to 13 million tons. So it's the largest potash importing nation on earth. And then, of course, followed by the US, China, and India. So we're going to be nearest producer, once obviously we're in production, to Brazil. But we're also going to have tremendous advantage over Canadians and Russians and Belarusians when it comes to India and China. And also I should note here that Africa consumes about 3 million tons a year and it doesn't have any potash production at all. So obviously, that will be a big market for us as well. Our timelines, we put a very aggressive timelines together, primarily because we think that we have huge advantage here because we know quite a bit about the project. We had all the data available to us, the drill core, seismic data, and all that, and we have all the elements on site, as I mentioned earlier, so we can mobilize much faster. So in the next few months, we'll be drilling the northern tip of the project. We'll put out a maiden resource estimate by summer, and then the second half of the year, we'll be doing a preliminary economic assessment while we'll continue with expansion drilling in the south of the project. So we think next year we should be in a position to actually convert a lot of this resource into measured and indicated, but also come up with a much larger resource in total, but also launch into a feasibility study. So just to conclude, a very large resource already in place. I can't talk about it, but the previous company actually did put out a JORC-compliant resource. So we know what is in the ground. We'll just expand it. We'll turn it into measured and indicated and eventually into reserves next year. Very strong team that has done this before. Again, in a very good jurisdiction. And one other thing on the company itself, we're trading on Venture. MLP is the ticker. It's pretty tight structure, share structure. 40% is owned by the board and management. We've got enough cash in the coffers to go forward with all these programs. And we just announced actually a very quick friends and family round this week, which is already completed as well. We already got the money. So there will be enough cash there to actually execute on all these programs that I mentioned. And the plan is obviously in the next, probably, I would say, 6 to 12 months, raise more capital so that we're well positioned for feasibility study and some other further works. So thanks a lot.